Very. Somebody's nursing a bloody nose this morning. Right now, the clock is ticking as we approach the fiscal cliff, the automatic combo of tax hikes and spending cuts, which most experts say would plunge the country into another recession. Tax hikes on wealthy Americans, a big sticking point because of the taxpayer protection pledge promoted by Grover Norquist. He's the lobbyist and conservative activist who convinced many Republicans and policymakers to oppose all tax hikes. Well, now at least 10 GOP lawmakers say they'd be willing to consider breaking that pledge. Senator Saxby Chambliss was the first to announce, followed by other prominent Republicans, including Senators Lindsey Graham and John McCain, then the chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee, Congressman Peter King.
$16 trillion in debt. The only pledge we should be making to each other is to avoid becoming Greece, and Republicans should put revenue on the table.
I think everything should be on the table. I myself am opposed to tax increases. The fact is the Speaker and the Majority Leader and the President are going to be in a room trying to find the best package. I'm not going to prejudge it.
Joining us now for a fair and balanced debate, Doug Thornell, the former communications director for the chairman of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, Congressman Chris Van Hollen. Ron Bonjean is former communications director to House Speaker Dennis Hastert. Ron, let's begin with you. Has Grover Norquist lost his influence on Capitol Hill?
Well, let me just say that this conversation started right after the election when Speaker Boehner said that revenues would be on the table as well as spending cuts and entitlement reform, but we would not raise tax rates. I have seen nothing different than what these senators have said in the last day or so than what Speaker Boehner has said. The key here is the devil is in the details. Once we see some sort of fine print in the next couple of weeks, we'll know where our legislators stand. And one interesting thing here I just want to add is we keep talking about tax reform, but we have not really had a big conversation in the media about entitlement reform. Medicare is exploding, billions of dollars, and we have millions of people who are counting on it who are going to be retiring. The baby boomers are retiring, and it's going to go larger and larger, and yet we have not talked about that yet. So instead of, while we're talking about Grover Norquist versus these members, I really think the devil is going to be in the details, and we're going to have to talk about a broader conversation between tax revenue and entitlement reform.
All right, so Doug, if Republicans are open to revenue increases, whether that means tax rates or something else we'll get into in just a bit, but if they are open to that, what are Democrats willing to give?
Well, I think if you remember, the first Budget Control Act had $1 trillion in spending cuts that the president signed off on. So clearly on spending, the Democrats are open there. I think there are certainly reforms of Medicare, increased efficiencies to Medicare that Democrats would be willing to take a look at. In fact, we did it in the Affordable Care Act. But I do think that right now, if you look at where things are right now, the prospects for a deal are so much better than they were a year and a half ago. I mean, Congress a year and a half ago looked like that underwear riot you just showed in terms of what was going on. I mean, there was no real room for both sides to come together. I think you're seeing the tone on both sides improve drastically. I think for House Republicans, there is a little space for them to come to the table and bend a little bit on taxes. And I think Democrats have demonstrated in the past that they're willing to put, pretty much everything on the table. But clearly the bottom line is it needs to be a balanced deal. That's what the American people are looking for. Polls support that, and that's revenue, and that's cuts. And I think that we're heading in that direction.
I saw the movie Lincoln over the weekend. That makes our current Congress look well behaved. Let me play something from Liz Cheney, the daughter of our former vice president, very quickly, and get your reaction.
It's a fundamental difference of view about where revenues come from. And, what Republicans, I hope, will stand firm on is the truth that revenues come from increased economic growth. We need pro-growth economic policies in order to create jobs and generate revenues.
So, Ron, can Republicans get more revenue without raising tax rates, as you suggest?
Yes, absolutely, they sure can, and that's through strongly looking at deductions and other issues in the tax code, but not raising rates. If you raise rates, they're going to impact jobs, they're going to impact the economy in a devastating way, and that's why I don't think you see any Republicans moving on that.
Doug, what do you think about that?
Well, the rates that we're talking about raising, they would go back to where they were under President Clinton. And during the 90s, I think most people would agree we had a pretty strong economy, certainly stronger than the one that George Bush and Liz Cheney's dad brought us. And so, look, at the end of the day, this is it's going to have to be balanced. And to get to $4.4 trillion, that's the kind of target number that the president has put out there, you can't just do it on spending cuts. And I'm not sure if you can do it just on capping deductions. But, that's what these guys are paid the big bucks for to figure out. Sit at the table and do their arithmetic and get to the final deal.
Worth pointing out, Doug, we had 9/11 during the Bush administration. That had a huge impact on this economy and the wars that came after it. Doug Thornell, Ron Bonjean, thank you both. We started this segment with a discussion of Grover Norquist. He will be Neil Cavuto's guest on Your World, 4 p.m. Eastern Time today. Hear what he has to say.
Well, we're going to show you some of the scenes just out of Egypt that we've been watching over the last several days. Protests